Go.
Awesome. All right, guys, welcome. My name is Jen Grubb. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you, or seeing a lot of your faces, or hearing a lot of your names. But Terry, as we know, is out doing relaxing, right? And doing what she does oh so well, and taking that time away and teaching us to do the same, right? And she asked me to host this, and I was so honored, because when she told me it was for Kathy Crockett, just like Jamie said last week, I was like, yes. And I know you're shaking your head like, oh, come on. But I tell you what, last week, this is why I love Kathy Crockett. Obviously, you're looking at a 100 Club member, with the Juice Plus company. But, I was thinking about it today, why I love her so much. And I know a lot of you can attest to this, is that when she talked about last week, that if you haven't listened to last week's call, it was amazing, that quality versus quantity. And Kathy, I have to tell you, I was spending time with my kids at the Great Wolf Lodge. It's an indoor water park that smells of nothing but chlorine. And if you know anything about it or look it up, we won't get into that. But in past times, I would look at that as, oh gosh, I got to get done with this. I've got so much to do. And I really embraced the moment. I thought, you know what, this is time that I need to fill myself back up so that I can kind of re-engage and hit qualifiers day and hit, August coming. And so I take a lot from that. It's so important, and that I'm not a machine. I always think about that. I have to remind myself. So thank you. But the second thing about Kathy that I love is just her investment in people and others. And it's the reason why I stay. When I first met Kathy, truly met her. I met her in passing maybe, but truly sat down, and she took the time to really get to know me. It was a big reason why I love this company, and why I know a lot of you do too as well. And we always say Kathy's the numbers person, and she took the time to look at my numbers as well. But it's why these calls are so important. I mean, I don't think a lot of us ever think about when we tell our teams to get on these Monday night calls, it's because you need to hear people like Kathy Crockett, because she's been there as a parent, as a full-time working professor. I mean, she's been there, and we all learn how important that is. And that's why I stay, because I look to people like her for that guidance. She definitely makes each and every one of us important. And today she's going to be talking about deepening relationships with reps, maybe during challenging times. So Kathy, thank you so much for your time once again. I'll stop talking, or I could keep talking, but I want to hear more from you. So thank you. Here you go, Kathy.
Well, Jen, you're awesome. It's kind of what I say too. It's because of friendships and people like you and just everyone else. And a lot of us were together at Horseshoe Bay Boot Camp. Those of us who could make it, and it was just a great time. Again, just getting to hug on everybody. It's like a big family reunion, and so that's why I love Zoom. I'm looking at all your faces, and I'm just wishing I could, like I said last week, I wish I could reach through and hug all of you, or like pause the sun and have 10 minutes with each one of you and just check in and ask a few questions. Like I see Carol Houston. I mean, I just see all these faces. I would love to get to chat with some more. But so with that, one thing I wanted to share tonight, I gave Terry lots of options, and she chose this one for tonight. And the reason is because it's sometimes, last week we talked about your energy and being really wise with where your energy goes. And so often when I'm teaching on this, I will tie in a piece about conflict, because that is one of the biggest energy drainers that I will have in my life. I don't know about you, but conflict is not always my favorite thing. And it certainly wasn't years ago, before I realized that conflict actually could be a good thing. I kind of had a background that you avoid conflict. Conflict's bad. You don't do it. Don't go there. It always ends horrible. Keep everybody happy. Don't just avoid. And really, I was probably in my mid-30s before I was taught that conflict's not bad. Conflict actually is a great thing for a relationship if it's handled correctly. It's actually an opportunity to deepen relationships, because if you are actually growing and being innovative and taking risks and putting yourself out there, there's naturally going to be conflict. If you're wanting to even have deep, meaningful relationships with your spouse and even your kids and even friends, well, guess what? We're all different human beings, and we may have different ways we want to come at things. And so there's going to be natural conflict that comes up. It's normal. It's healthy. It doesn't have to be toxic. And so when I had kind of that aha moment, it's like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Am I the only person on the planet who, is just now figuring this out? And so my guess is y'all are way down the road from me. Y'all were not, y'all are all clued in. I'm sure that conflict's not bad, but I just thought the biggest aha for me was this professor. I was actually taking a graduate conflict management course. And this tool, y'all know me, I'm all about tools and simplicity and being practical and simple. And so he showed us this tool, and it was just a game changer for me. And it's something I can remember. It's a tool I use all the time. And so I'm going to share my screen, because I think when I sent my handout, I created a chart, and I think Word in the email, it translated. So I'm not sure if the handout, if you pulled it up, if you're actually able to see the chart, or if it might have gotten jumbled a little bit. If you're trying to look at it on your phone, because it's a mobile device, it may not be coming up perfectly, but hopefully on the recording, you'll be able to draw the graph and see it, because I actually made a little PowerPoint for you to be able to see it. So I'm going to share my screen, and then hopefully this will be very easy for you to see. Okay, and I'm going to maximize it. Okay, so let me get to the very beginning. Sorry about that. I should already be there. Okay, hang on. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Okay, now we're good. All right, so this is a graph that highlights a tool, the tool I talked about. It's called the Task Relationship Graph Chart. And it basically is a napkin presentation. And what I mean by that is you could draw it on a napkin to remind yourself where you are on things. And it's all about deciding which gear, if you will, to be in when you're navigating your conflict. So if you're driving a car, I don't know if any of you have ever driven a stick shift before, but if you're driving a stick shift, there's different gears. There's low, high, whatever. I haven't driven a stick shift in a long time, but there are different gears that you operate in depending on the terrain, depending on, how fast you want to go. And so there's also different gears that you can operate within when you're managing conflict. Sometimes, the most common ones you'll hear about is avoid the conflict or compromise. Got to compromise, got to compromise, got to compromise. But actually, there's 5 different pieces of this puzzle that we can actually access and use as we're working in relationships and we're kind of working through conflict that might come up. So you'll notice that this is just, again, a really simple graph. You'll see that task is on the left, relationships on the bottom. And then you'll notice that on the left, task, the higher the importance of the task. So if a task is super critically important, perhaps at times that might trump relationship, and we'll kind of go through each of these as we go. But when relationships are really high, that might trump how big of a deal the task is. So as we work through that, just remember, this is all about how task and relationship work together. So the first one in the bottom left-hand corner, you notice that avoid is actually one of the gears. Earlier we said that, in other instances, if the relationship was very, very important to you, or the task was critically important, you could not avoid. That's not something that would be wise. However, if the task really is not that big of a deal to you, it's not earth-shattering, it's not something major, and the relationships, now all people are valuable. We care about all people no matter who they are, but the reality is we have deeper relationships with some people more than others. I love my husband much more than I might love a buddy, that kind of thing. So sometimes we have to face that reality, and often in sometimes instances, we can almost give too much attention to people that we don't have deep relationships with, and that actually damages our closer relationships. So we want to be wise about who gets our energy, who gets our focus, who gets our attention. So when you're avoiding, when the task doesn't really matter, you don't really care how it's done, if it gets messed up, it's not that big of a deal. And the relationship is one that you're not really close to the person, it's not a critical relationship, then you just avoid the conflict. If conflict comes up, you just avoid it. You do not put your energy there. So it's appropriate when neither the task or the relationship are important to you. And an example of that is like a telemarketer. Just today, I've had this number from Grapevine, Texas, trying to call me for weeks. And it finally drove me crazy enough that today I answered. Sure enough, a recording starts going. And I'm like, why did I answer this dumb call? Because I was irritated. I was like, I shouldn't have even answered it. That's a perfect example of avoiding it. I actually know people who thinks it's fun to answer a telemarketer and argue with them. I'm like, why would you even do that? I mean, you clearly don't have enough to do with your day. So sometimes it's very appropriate to avoid the conflict. Stay out of it. It's not my fight. I'm not going to go there. I'm not putting my energy there. So that's appropriate when, again, the task and a relationship are not important to you. So the next piece of the puzzle you'll notice is the word compete. It's on that left hand of the graph where the task is very important. When you need to compete for something, you have to really think through, when am I going to compete and really fight that it has to be my way? It really must be this way. It's got to be. I'm not going to compromise. I don't have time for other things. I can't avoid it. It's too important. So when do you compete? Well, that's when the relationship isn't of critical importance to you, but the task is highly important. And an example of this would be a doctor in an emergency room. And so it's very appropriate to compete when completing the task at hand is so urgent that you are willing to lose the relationship to get it done, or possibly damage the relationship. Or at times, sometimes relationships take lightning bolts, is how it was explained to me one time. But if you have poured into your people, and specifically maybe your kids, if you've poured into your kids, and let's say one time you blow it and you lose your temper, or like if your toddler's about to run out into the street, I'm sorry, we're not going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I may yell very loudly, stop. There's no sugarcoating that. And they're like shocked, and I'm probably really scared and mad maybe that they're running out in the street, but it's too important. The task is too important. The task trumps everything. And so if I'm in the emergency room and the lead doctor is making decisions and it's urgent, I'm about to die on the table, I don't necessarily want him worrying about hurting people's feelings if he's too strong or she's too strong. If she's running what's going to happen in the treatment, she's got to make decisions. She's got to go. There's no negotiation. There's no compromising usually. We got to get it done. And so that's an example of when it's very appropriate to compete. Now, here's something interesting. I actually had a graduate student who worked in emergency rooms, and she was hired as a consultant to go and help with the high turnover rates in emergency rooms. Because it's such a high stress situation, and so often they're having to compete and have to kind of put relationships on the side burner, people are stressed out and they don't want to work in that environment. And so turnover is really, really high. So there is a cost. However, it's still appropriate at times to compete in the conflict. Now, the next piece of the puzzle you notice is accommodate, and that's on the bottom right corner. Accommodate is appropriate when the relationship is extremely important to you and the task, you really do not care. You really don't. Now, not the passive aggressive kind where someone asks you a question, you're like, I don't care. And then you really do, and they do it wrong. And then you're like, ugh, and then you're kind of mad, So it's not that. Accommodate is you truly don't mind. You really don't care. And a great story I tell on this one is my sweet husband, after church on Sundays, what's the big question in the car? What do you want to eat, right? And so he literally, we've been on vacation before, and that sweet man has driven through 3 different drive-thrus to get lunch one day just to accommodate people. He just thought, you know what? I don't really care if it takes us 45 minutes. We're on a vacation. What else are we going to do with our time? So there's 3 restaurants right here by each other. So if you want one and you want one and you want a different one, it's no big deal. Let's just go. And so he accommodated us, which was hilarious when I think about, okay, are we really that kind of prima donna that we have to have 3 different lunches? But at the time, he didn't care. And it was just a good tool to use. It made it fun. It's not like we do that every Sunday because we don't, but we were on vacation. He goes, why not? It doesn't matter. It's really not that big of a deal. And so that's an example of him accommodating us because the relationship's really important. And he really didn't care where we ate. He just didn't want there to be all this conflict in the car. Well, I don't want that. Well, no, I don't want that. And so therefore, there will be times that truly the task is not that big of a deal to you. And often I'll also see sometimes when my kids were little, they were determined to put on their shoes by themselves, even though I knew it was going to end badly. They probably would put them on the wrong feet. It would take forever. It may not even be the same shoes, but sometimes we'd be going places and I'm like, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to let them do it. I'm not going to battle them. I'm going to pick my battles. And so accommodate really is a valuable tool at times. And we really want to think through it. I know there are some people who just like to kind of argue and like to always just bring up the other side of the argument just for fun. And sometimes maybe that is fun, but sometimes that really damages relationships. And if it really doesn't matter to you, why would you put your energy there and drain the other person's energy thinking that they're having to defend something they really, really care about? So that's just something to be thoughtful about as a leader, especially. There will be times you'll have a preference maybe for something to be done a certain way, but really it doesn't matter how it's done. And so let your team member do it the way they want to do it. You know, they don't always have to do it exactly the way you tell them. There may be lots of flexibility in how something can get done. So again, accommodate is appropriate when, it's funny, I work on a PC, but I'm on a Mac tonight, so I'm going the wrong way. So again, accommodation is appropriate when the relationship is so important that accomplishing the task is secondary to your relationship. Okay. So now we're going to move on to compromise. So compromise is right in the middle, and it is an important piece of the puzzle. It's used a lot, and compromise is not necessarily bad, but you notice that it's most appropriately used when the relationship is one of your mid-level relationships and the task is also mid-level. So you'll notice it's in the middle for a reason. It means that it doesn't mean you don't compromise when the task is extremely, extremely important. And you also work really hard as much as you can not to always compromise all the time with relationships that are absolutely key for you. So here's kind of what it looks like. It's appropriate when you're mostly interested in coming to a resolution and the outcome of that resolution is not highly important to either side. Because you have to remember that both sides are having to give up something. Neither side is getting their needs met fully. And so for long-term relationships, if neither party is really getting their full needs met, it actually damages relationships. That's why you have to really think about the times when you really may not care how something's done, but they really do care. Well, let them do it how they want to, because it's not really going to meet your need anyway, because you weren't really desiring that, right? There may be other times that you could just avoid it completely, maybe. I mean, not usually with meaningful relationships, or maybe it's just not that big of a deal to you. Maybe it matters more to them than you and you can let it go, or y'all can talk about it. The key with compromise is communication. What's important to remember is that there is another tool in your toolbox. There's another gear you can shift to where both sets of people get all of their needs met. And that is something called collaborate. Now, collaborate, it's not effective or efficient to use collaborate all the time, because it's going to take you a lot more time and a lot more energy to work through it. The difference between collaborate and compromise: with compromise, you have a pie and you're dividing up that pie into pieces, 60-40, 70-30, 50-50. You're dividing out that pie. With collaborate, you're actually making the pie bigger. You're trying to think of maybe a third alternative. Well, he wants that, she wants this. Is there actually a third alternative that neither one of us have thought of that actually can meet both of our needs? And often our professor would say, often where you find that third alternative it's just under the surface, because often the conflict at hand is not really the root cause of what's going on. It might be that one party is wanting this and one is that, but really underneath it is, I just want you to respect me more. I want you to spend time with me more. I want you to, there's usually deeper things going on. And if you can keep talking and keep working at it, you'll have a creative solution that could solve the problem in such a beautiful way that both people feel that their needs are fully met and that they both got their way. Instead, it's kind of like Terry Luongo says a lot, it's not either or, it's both and. So how do you get to the both and piece of the puzzle? Well, you collaborate. But again, because it does take all that extra energy and time, it's only appropriate when both the task and the relationship are very, very important to you. And it's like it says here, it's complex, it's adaptive, it really requires a lot of work. So you have to really be thoughtful about when you pull out this tool. You can't use it all the time or else you'll drain yourself. You want to save it for the critically important things. And then you want to be in these other gears when other types of conflict come up. So that is just a little bit of a highlight of this task relationship model. But I hope that it's something that you'll be able to perhaps remember the next time you feel that conflicting feeling of, oh, something's wrong here. Okay, which gear should I be operating in? Is this something I can just let go? Should I even be irritated about this? Maybe I just need to let this go and avoid it. Or, you know what? honestly, I might prefer to do it this way, but it's really no big deal to do it this other way. I'm just going to accommodate. There may be other things that it's absolutely critical that it be done this certain way. And so you do have to kind of be a little stronger and say, no, this is how it has to be, you know, and it may be that you can compromise. Well, hey, you give a little, I'll give a little, we'll figure it out. But then the beauty really comes in the collaboration. So with that, I know we may be getting done a little early, but I wanted to give you your time back. I don't have a whole lot more other than this simple model. But on the handout, there are a few other phrases that Catherine Lee has told me a lot about: pausing, praying, trying to get some perspective. Another thing with conflict is really be aware of your tanks. You know, we talked about that last week. Be aware if any of your tanks are low, because if you're finding yourself in a conflict, if any of those tanks are low and you're tired or you don't feel well or you're drained, you won't have the energy to manage the conflict well. You may say things you don't mean. You'll let little things get a hold of you that really are no big deal. So just be really thoughtful. If you're about to go into a discussion of a conflict, just be aware that you don't want to do that tired. You don't want to do that frustrated. You want to give yourself a chance to breathe, maybe to create some space, just to try to get some perspective before you start the conversation, if at all possible. You can't always do that because sometimes curveballs comes and conflict comes out of nowhere and you don't even realize you're in it until you're right in the middle of it. But don't be afraid to ask for time. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, can I think about this for a little bit and get back to you? And usually if you can create just a little bit of a buffer, you then can kind of think through which one of these gears you might want to operate in. So Jen, thanks for letting me be on the call. It's so great to see everyone. And I hope y'all have a great week.
Well, wow, Kathy, I've heard you speak on this, you know, a couple times before, I feel like, but every single time I feel like I hear something new. One thing that really stuck out to me was that there is going to be natural conflict through deep relationships. I mean, that really hit home to me because we are in this relationship business, like we talk about. And so there is going to be natural conflict. I mean, and then that's okay. And it's just how you react to that. And I love, you just have taught us all so much about how we react to those situations. And I feel like, and I probably can speak for most of these people, that I transfer this into my own home at times. I find myself saying things I told my daughter the other day, just pause and let's gain some perspective. And she looked at me like, what? I mean, but it's good. I feel like, because I feel like, well, maybe I'm teaching them something too. So thank you so much for your time. Always. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for hopping on tonight. I know with travel and summer, it can be crazy, but we're always so blessed when Kathy Crockett shares her words of wisdom. So thank you everyone. Have a great, great week. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye.